I'm and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. The countdown to Trump's return to the White House has now begun, with Joe Biden bidding farewell to his presidential term. A time of global upheaval, the last 4 years had Biden facing off against Russian aggression, economic tensions with China, and rekindled unrest in the Middle East, to name but a few. But once the dust has settled, what legacy will President Biden leave behind, especially given the latest news of a ceasefire deal in Gaza? Joining us now is Marcin Bużański, Center for Diplomacy and Negotiation Director at the Collegium Civitas. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning, a pleasure to be with you again.
So let's begin with the Middle East deal. The Biden administration said, well, this is our success. The upcoming Trump administration says, no, it's because of us. Everyone wants to claim this development as their own. What do you think? Who's right?
Well, certainly it's primarily the Biden's administration's success. This deal in the shape that it's currently on, that has been approved, has been on the table more or less since May in the current structure. So this is a long overdue situation, and perhaps there was some influence around reaching it because of the new administration taking office in just a few days. But de facto, nearly all of it has been the efforts of Biden's administration, the efforts led by Antony Blinken, with months and months of shuttle diplomacy and mediation happening primarily in Qatar, but also in many other capitals. So what we're seeing now is truly long overdue. It comes with great happiness on the side, of course, of the Palestinians in Gaza, because for them it's a question of survival. It met with great relief from the international community, as everybody was has been expecting this deal to happen much earlier than that. So certainly it's important. Certainly it is a form of success for the Biden administration, but it can also be argued that it's way too long, and that if the administration had more influence, more power, it could push earlier on for this deal to happen.
So let us assume that history will remember it as such, as a success of the Biden administration. But what will be the overall assessment? Essentially, are there more successes than there are failures?
Well, just to make one more point on this deal, let's remember that it's built in 3 phases. Its first phase is only to start on Sunday and to last 42 days. So it's very well possible that it may not hold. So we have to see if it holds, where it can actually label it as success. If it's sustainable, if it holds, if it gets the full backing in this shape of the Trump administration as well, then we can probably mention that. But coming back to Biden's legacy, I think it's checkered at best, and of course it's early to tell what will be the implications long term of some of his political and policy milestones, particularly on climate change, particularly on healthcare and on the U.S. economy. And this Biden has argued in his farewell speech that effects for the long term for the United States will be impactful, will be great, and will be felt by the society. We have to also see if Donald Trump overturns some of those policies, particularly when it comes to climate change and particularly when it comes to the healthcare. It's a question mark, because a lot of them are actually aiding and supporting a lot of the population in so-called red states, which of course is the political base of Donald Trump.
So these are important caveats, right? But what about foreign policy?
Yes, the foreign policy part. I think on the side of failures, we can clearly state Afghanistan. Despite this was the initial policy of Donald Trump, and he was the author of his administration of the deal with the Taliban, the way of the exit happened of American forces from Afghanistan is certainly a failure of the Biden administration. So I think that's definitely a difficult situation. I think when we look at Ukraine, history will judge. You can say it's somewhere in the middle at best. There is absolutely no doubt that without the reactions of the US administration, of the Biden administration, Ukraine would not survive Russian aggression. And of course, the scale of support from the US, from intelligence to financial to direct arms supply, is unprecedented. And the coalition it has built to support Ukraine is also unprecedented. At the same time, one can make a strong argument that that they said A and they haven't said B, that the administration should have pushed much harder, gave earlier on weapons to strike in Russia, planes, artillery, missiles ready to strike targets beyond 300, 400, 500 miles. This has not happened or has happened very, very late and not in amounts which would give Ukraine the upper hand and really the ability to defeat Russia. So this is, as I said, a checkered legacy when it comes to Ukraine that is left by the administration, and we still have to see on its impact.
Well, let's be honest, the House Republicans didn't help at one point when they blocked the funding for Ukraine. So we need to also remember that for the sake of fairness. Now, looking at other achievements of President Biden, what would you say those were? Anything that is particularly notable from our perspective?
Well, I think after the first Trump administration, Biden has brought multilateralism, I think, kept it alive and pushed for a number of initiatives when it comes to collaboration around technology, around cyber attacks and cyber aggressions. I think he's done a fairly good job when it comes to the relation between the US and China. His administration was very clear that this is a competition, that China is the greatest adversary that the US has, but he's been able to build a relation where sort of the actions of sticks and carrots are very clear and are developed in a way that also diplomacy can take place. So I think that's a fairly successful policy from the Biden administration. I think climate change is another area where he's managed to bring the United States back to the negotiation table and push forward to some degree with a success on implementation of the Paris Accords. Of course, now there'll be a change with the Donald Trump administration. And finally, I think in the Middle East, apart, of course, from the tragic situation in Gaza, the administration has been able to keep a fairly steady situation in places such as Iraq, in places such as the Gulf, where it's built strong relations, kept building strong relations with the countries there. So there's a checkered, I think, legacy to be left here, which we'll still have to see the impact in years to come.
Do you think that President Biden often had the right idea but was held back by his advisors? If we go back to his speech in Warsaw following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he said, and I quote from memory, "My God, we cannot allow this man to remain in power." This was a comment about Vladimir Putin, but later on the administration did some serious backtracking. Do you think the US should have had the ambitious goal of also procuring, by economic pressure and other means, change of political situation in Russia, but the advisors said no, too risky, let's not do that?
Well, I don't think this was ever the aim. It was more of a vigor of speech at the moment to give the world and Ukrainians more hope. I think the whole idea was that a defeat of Russia in Ukraine will allow it to decrease its power to influence other countries. This is how we should read those remarks. As we've seen, sort of and heard of the inside dealings and discussions within the White House around Ukraine, Biden himself wasn't sure. It's not that he was the strongest pusher for a hard position and for delivery. So there were different voices in the administration. I think more restraint was coming from Jake Sullivan and his team. State and Pentagon have been pushing for more robust action and earlier delivery of lethal weapons, equipment, and at grander scale. But Biden himself was reluctant really to engage with a stronger response to Russia, fearing that the conflict could escalate. And I believe this was a mistake. And down the line, this is how we'll see this. But also, we have to underline that the support provided was still unprecedented and absolutely crucial for the survival of Ukraine and for its continued heroic fight in the last 2.5 years.
Marcin Bużański was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
A pleasure. Thank you very much.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and features.